Good morning, Bhante. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I forgot to drink my water.
Good morning, Bhante. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, let us begin our Metta Meditation. May all beings be happy and secure. May all beings have happy minds, whatever living beings there may be, without exception, weak or strong, long, large, medium, short, subtle or gross, visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth. May all beings have happy minds. Let no one deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere. Neither from anger nor ill will should anyone wish harm to another. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so towards all living beings, one should cultivate a boundless heart. One should cultivate for all the world a heart of boundless loving friendliness, above, below, and all around, unobstructed, without hate or resentment, whether standing, walking, sitting, lying down, or whenever awake. One should develop this mindfulness. This is called divinely dwelling here,
not falling
into
into
erroneous views, but virtuous and endowed with vision, removing desires for sensual pleasures. One comes never again to birth in the womb. With this metta thought, let us begin our meditation. Metta thought is a very wonderful foundations of meditation. When we start meditation with metta, mind continues to be soft, gentle, relaxed and peaceful. If we if we recite metta with very compassionate metta feeling in the mind. Now let us begin with our breathing. As we always mention, focus the mind on the breath. Notice without verbalizing the breath touching the rims of your nostrils, and notice the chest area expanding and lower abdominal area expanding as we breathe in. As we breathe out, lower abdomen contract, chest area contract, and we feel the breath leaving our body through the nostrils. As we breathe out and in, we notice a very brief pause between inhaling and exhaling. Noticing that without verbalizing or trying to manipulate that gap to widen it and make it more durable. These are all artificial. We don't do anything artificial. Always remember we want to see things exactly as they are. And that is the theme we always have to keep in mind, because our goal also is to see things as they really are. Not as we want, not as we force, not as we manipulate, but as they really are in their own intrinsic nature. Intrinsic nature of everything is impermanent. And then as we breathe in, we feel the breath, we perceive the breath, we have intentional attention to breath, and we are conscious of the breath. As we breathe in, all these change along with the changing breath, even faster than the breath changes. While we are breathing out, feeling, perception, thought, attention, consciousness, all change even much faster than the breath changes. So when we see these changes, there is nothing to excite or agitate or disappoint or cling to. They all simply flow, flux, move, and run like a river. And then arises in our mind a moment of letting go, because when we see this happening, we cannot hold on to anything. This is also a reality. Then that is our greed, which also is a hindrance. Then, since there is nothing to hold on to, there is no anger or hatred. Anger or hatred comes into our mind or appears in our mind only when we try to hold on to something. And if we cannot hold on to it, we get upset or angry. In this case, we let go of what is going on, and there is nothing we are holding back, and therefore the mind becomes relaxed, and there arises a feeling of metta. When feeling of metta arises, then compassion arises along with that, because we all know that the purpose of our practice is to wish goodwill, peace and happiness for those who are suffering. That means we are conscious of beings, suffering being. Whenever we are conscious of them, compassion arises in the mind. And then restlessness and worry fades away, and sleepiness and drowsiness fade away, doubt fades away, we gain joy, happiness and concentration. When we gain concentration, we use that concentrated mind to see what is happening more clearly, developing our insight, wisdom of the true nature of things as they are. The true nature or intrinsic nature of anything and everything is impermanence. That is our mindfulness, and that is our insight. With this, we continue our practice. Dukkha patta ca niddukkha bhaya patta ca nibbhaya soka patta ca nissoka hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings be. With this inspiring thought, let us let us continue our Dhamma talk. I started talking on feelings, and day before yesterday I mentioned how we use feeling as in our meditation. Sometimes people might wonder why we bring meditation to this dependent origination talk. Friends, dependent origination is not something different from the practice of meditation, because everything is connected. Meditation is directly connected to dependent origination, because in dependent origination, the central theme or the formula is seeing rising and falling. When this rises, this rises. When this is, this is. When this is not, this is not. When this passes away, this passes away. When this not, this is not, like that. This is the theme we see even in mindfulness meditation. Let us continue our talk on feeling. I said, when feeling pleasure, feeling, a bhikkhu understands, I feel a pleasant feeling. Here we must use the word understanding, not using word to repeat. We don't repeat when we feel pleasant feeling. We don't repeat the word, I feel pleasant feeling, I feel pleasant feeling. We just be aware of it. This is a very profound, very important message we got to remember. When feeling a painful feeling, he understands, I feel painful feeling. When feeling neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he understands, I feel neither painful nor pleasant feeling. When feeling worldly pleasant feeling, he understands, I feel worldly pleasant feeling. What is the worldly pleasant feeling? Pleasant feeling with underlying tendency of greed. That is called worldly pleasant feeling. Of course, any pleasant feeling in an ordinary person's mind, life, the underlying tendency of greed definitely underlies in that feeling. Then, therefore, it must be understood very clearly that this feeling is pleasant, worldly pleasant feeling. He understands well. When feeling an unworldly pleasant feeling. He understands, I feel an unworldly pleasant feelings. So you can understand the difference between worldly feeling and unworldly feeling. For worldly feeling, the Pali word is samisa vedana, in this case samisa sukha, happiness. When there is no underlying tendency, it is called niramisa sukha. There is no underlying tendency to the underlying tendency of greed in the pleasant feeling. For instance, when we gain jhana, we have pleasant feeling. In the jhana, we have overcome greed as a hindrance. In the absence of hindrance, greed, we experience pleasant feeling. It has nothing to do with the world or greed, and it remains to be very pleasant without underlying tendency of greed. That is therefore called pleasant, unworldly pleasant feeling. Niramisa sukha. Niramisa sukha. We hear this word very often in Buddhist literature. Then, when feeling worldly painful feeling, he understands, I feel a worldly painful feeling. When painful feeling arises, it has the underlying tendency of anger, resentment, disappointment, and therefore it is called worldly painful feeling. So he understands that the feeling has pain, feeling is painful, and at the same time in that feeling there is a dislike, disappointment. You may say to yourself even cursing words, and you may accuse others for having unpleasant or painful feeling, not only physical, even mental. So, and therefore, that feeling is called painful, worldly feeling. And then, when feeling an unworldly painful feeling, he understands, I feel unworldly painful feeling. How can that be unworldly? Because it has no anger. As a hindrance, second hindrance, greed is first hindrance in the list, not in any, it is not a priority, but priority list, but in order to teach, they are listed in this way. Second hindrance is anger, kama, chanda, vyapada. When you practice jhana, attain jhana, you don't have anger when you have painful feeling. Not only that, when you, I mentioned this earlier in detail, we experienced the same thing that anybody else experiences, and the one who experiences everything, all form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, and then he sees them all impermanent. Seeing them impermanent, ordinary people get disappointed, but the one who practices mindfulness, seeing impermanence, will have an urgency. Is that he would say to himself, so and such a thing is impermanent, such and such a thing is impermanent. I saw impermanence of everything all my life. I saw everything impermanence is unsatisfactory. I saw everything impermanent, unsatisfactory, without self, even though I have seen them in this way, I still have not attained enlightenment. That makes him disappointed. That is a painful, unworldly painful feeling. This painful feeling has nothing to do with the worldly things because there is no anger in it. But he is disappointed that he has not attained the goal. And therefore that kind of painful feeling is called unworldly painful feeling. And it is called niramisa dukkha. So dukkha has samisa dukkha, niramisa dukkha. Suffering with greed, hatred, and suffering without hatred and greed. That is also very important to remember. When you practice mindfulness, you should be able to make the distinction between these two types of painful feelings. If we keep using words, you will hang on to words and mind will be completely preoccupied with words, obsessed with words, concepts, and you will miss this point. You will not understand this point of the difference between worldly painful feeling, unworldly painful feeling, or samisa dukkha, niramisa dukkha, samisa sukha and niramisa sukha. Then if feeling worldly neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he understands I feel worldly feeling, I feel the feeling, worldly feeling worldly neither painful nor pleasant worldly feeling. What is the neither painful nor pleasant worldly feeling? Of course, when there is neither pleasant nor painful feeling, there is an underlying tendency of confusion, ignorance. What is ignorance? What is his ignorance? Ignorant of? Ignorant that it is impermanent. Neither painful nor pleasant feeling also is impermanent. And that he does not know. When he does not know this, he gets confused. And therefore he understands that I have neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, but I don't know what to do with that. I got just stuck, plateau, no movement. I got stuck. I'm in the same place. This kind of thought the person will develop because of this confusion, ignorance. On the other hand, Buddha said when feels unworldly neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he understands I feel an unworldly painful, neither painful nor pleasant feeling. He understands it. It is unworldly. Why it is unworldly? Because there is no ignorance. He doesn't have the ignorance that it is impermanent. He has the wisdom. From the beginning of his practice, he sees this truth, reality. In my earlier instructions on guided meditation, I mentioned that intrinsic nature of anything is impermanence. Intrinsic nature. When we say intrinsic, we all understand the nature belongs to itself. Each and everything in the world has its own intrinsic nature. That intrinsic nature is impermanence. That is why the Buddha said, Sabbe Sankara Anicca. Sabbe Sankara Anicca. All conditioned things are impermanent. And this meditator sees this. And he sees the same thing as other people see, same sound he hears, maybe same smell, same taste, same touch, same thought the person may have, or similar thought may person has. And in each of them he sees this intrinsic nature. Everything, every form, feeling, perception, thought, and consciousness, or every sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought have their own intrinsic nature. What is their intrinsic nature? They all are changing, impermanent. When he sees this reality, he is delighted. He has wisdom. Other person has ignorance. The opposite of ignorance is wisdom. So he has this wisdom, this insight. And when the meditator meditates, he should be able to see these distinctions in his own mind, in his own experience. And therefore, this using the feeling as a part of our, as an object of our meditation is a very profound practice, very important practice. Now we go to real insight in this, in the four foundations of mindfulness. At the end of every section, Buddha gave the insight. You practice certain section and you get insight from that. That is why it is called insight meditation. When we practice in mindfulness of four foundations of mindfulness, we have first section is mindfulness of breathing. At the end of the mindfulness of breathing, we get insight. And this is the insight that Buddha mentioned in that discourse. And this insight is repeated at the end of every section of the four foundations of mindfulness. And friends, I must tell you, you may be surprised when I hear this. You have to practice only one, not all of them, only one, and have this insight. Once you practice one and got insight, if you go to the next, you get the same insight. You go to the third, you get the same insight. You go to the fourth, same insight. There is no degree of insight. First degree, second degree, and one insight, other is better insight, other is the best insight, and so forth. In the mindfulness also there is no good mindfulness, better mindfulness, best mindfulness, and so forth. There is unmindfulness and mindfulness. In the mindfulness, you have a development. Slowly you develop. You have certain degree of mindfulness. Insight also develops. And in this discourse, Buddha has not mentioned any difference between arising insight from the practice of mindfulness of breathing and the insight you gain from the practice of mindfulness of feeling, or insight within the same mindfulness of the body. Mindfulness of the body is divided into 6 categories. At the end of each category, this insight is mentioned, and he did not say that the second insight is better than the first insight. Because what you see in the second part of the meditation on the body, what he shows as insight is exactly the same as you gain insight from the practice of the first part. And therefore, I will show it later on more with more evidence. But let me continue this. In this way, he abides contemplating feeling as feeling internally, or he abides contemplating feeling as feeling externally, or he abides contemplating feeling as feeling both internally and externally. Okay. You might wonder, when you feel pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling, and so forth, all these 9 categories of feelings, and their worldly and unworldly feelings, it is your personal experience, 100% personal. You cannot share your feeling with somebody else. You may use words, but you can never share your feeling with somebody else. Then, how can you know other person's feeling? How can other person know your feeling? You see, this is where insight comes in. When you get insight, you see how feeling arises and how it passes away, and what happens in between. Feeling arises. As it arises, impermanent arises. As feeling continues, impermanence continues. That's called altering. And when feeling ceases, and then impermanence is there for that particular feeling. And then you see this pattern. Feeling arises, reached peak and pass away. Arises, reached, pass away. Arises, reached peak and passes away. Whether it is pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, pleasant worldly feeling, unpleasant worldly feeling, and so forth, this feeling arises in a certain way depending on senses, sensory object, consciousness, and then contact and feeling. This is how feeling arises. First senses, then therefore it is called, if the feeling arises through eye, this is called Chakku Sampasaja Vedana. Chakku Sampasaja Vedana. That is, the feeling arises through the contact of eye contact. Feeling arises through the ear contact. Feeling arises through the nose contact. And so forth, all the 6 kind of feelings are named after the senses. So, this is how feeling arises. Now, when you see how the feeling arises in you, that's all. That is your personal experience. Then you universalize it, generalize it. Yes, everybody else in the world feels the same way. I, visual objects, eye consciousness, eye contact, feeling. It can never be changed. This pattern, this dependently arising system, this dependent origination happens in the same way. Whether the Buddhas come into existence or not, this is how feeling arises. It is just like impermanence, whether the Buddhas come into existence or not, impermanence is impermanent. Similarly, whether the Buddhas come into existence or not, feeling arises depending on these four factors. What are the four factors? In fact, five, maybe four, let me. Senses, sensory object, consciousness, and contact, and the feeling. So feeling arises from the combination of these four factors. And depending on them. I posed a question myself earlier. Why do I talk about meditation on feeling and trying to connect it with dependent origination? You can see the connection. Now, this is how you can see feeling arising in others. That is called uh, he contemplates feeling as feeling externally. And then, or he abides contemplating feeling as both internally and externally. Then you connect how I feel, I get the feeling, how feeling arises in this, how feeling arises in him, and therefore there is no difference between feeling arising in him and feeling arises, the method, system, formula of feeling arising in me and feeling arises in him, the formula is the same. So in this respect, we both are the same. And therefore, if if you pinch my skin, I feel the pinch. And if I pinch him, he feels the pinch. And therefore, this helps us to practice metta. This helps us to practice karuna, compassion. This helps us to practice appreciative joy. This helps us to practice equanimity. So, in order to practice the Brahma Vihara, universal friendliness, this practice is very important. What practice is seeing, the comparing. We compare with each other in many ways, comparing us with other people in many ways. My height, my size, my color, my achievement, and so height and color achievement and so forth. These are the way that people normally compare oneself with the others. But there is a much more beneficial, important way of comparing in order to live together as human beings and also develop our mind to gain liberation. So, the Buddha's teaching is so lofty and profound and universal and so compassionate that he shows in this practice from the dependent origination, from the learning of seeing impermanence, from being mindful. When we combine all these three together, we can live in the world with all kind of differences. They are superficial differences, but fundamentally we all are one in this respect. So I could not finish it because I'm so excited or enthusiastic in explaining or clarifying the meaning of this. Most of us we practice meditation, may not, some there may be some, but most of us may not look at our practice, look at the combination between dependent origination, impermanence, and meditation practice of four Brahma Viharas. And I will also show later on how they are connected with the seven factors of enlightenment. Okay? For now, you will be surprised how I want to make meditation simple and also at the same time how in this simplicity the Buddha's teaching evolve in our mind. With this, I want to conclude this morning's session and thank you very much for coming and listening and participating in this very noble practice. There is nothing noble in me, but the noble in the Dhamma. We all come together to practice this noble Dhamma. And I'm so happy that you join us. So, friends, we have practiced metta, practiced meditation, and listened to Dhamma. We did all these things to share merits with all suffering beings. We know that there are beings, human beings, affected by this COVID-19, and some are still suffering. We want them to be free from that suffering, and we wish them they come back to normal state and recover very quickly and return to their normal health. And there are people who have died because of this virus, and their relatives are still mourning here and elsewhere all over the world. We want to share merits with them and wish them relief from their sorrow, lamentation, pain, and grief, and return to their normal life and live long with good health. And there are people who are trying to help these suffering persons, patients, doctors, nurses, and hospital staffs. In many capacities, they try to help, and may they all be healthy, strong, and immune to this virus so that they can continue their very compassionate, selfless service for the humankind. And there are individuals who are trying otherwise in many ways to come up with vaccine or pills or something to prevent this happening in future. And there are beings who are in powerful positions, political and otherwise, leaders of countries. I honestly wish these leaders have patience, courage, understanding, compassion, and wisdom to make right decision for the benefit of all of them. With our metta thought, we all together as one body, one human body, make this wish this morning as we did other mornings and continue our metta practice. With this, I want to end our practice and thank you for coming and participating in this practice.